Welcome to our monthly webinar. My name is Natalie from Orchid, and today I'm joined by Anne from Orchid and Nancy from RLA, Orchid's distributor in North America, to talk about cross-company collaboration in Sage 300, focusing on Notes and Document Management Link. Notes lets you attach context-sensitive notes to Sage 300 screens, and Document Management Link provides easy access to essential documents directly from your Sage 300 screens. Notes and Document Management Link are designed to work with many teams. Today, we will show examples of using Notes and DML within the finance teams, between project, HR, and finance teams, between operations, procurement, sales, and customer service. First, how does Document Management Link work in Sage 300? A user receives external files related to information that is already or is going to be stored in Sage 300. They can find that record in Sage 300 and upload the document and link it to that relevant information in Sage 300. That can apply to perpetual information like customer, EFT, direct debit mandates, supplier contract, supplier terms, items, GL account, long description, employees, projects, banks. It can also apply to transactions, including sales ordered, journal entries, purchase orders, invoices, payments. And then, when other users or the same user view those details in Sage 300, they can then view the relevant documents. They can directly from the Sage 300 screen that they're looking at, and from there they can open the document, find the information that they need. Notes also lets you add and view information in the context of Sage 300 screens. One type of note that is very useful to share information and processes between team members is notes that apply to a specific screen in Sage 300 to provide instruction or procedures on how to use this screen in your specific environment. This applies to both web screens, and like you can see here on the GL account screen, we're giving instruction on selecting valid currency on the currency tab. Or on the desktop screens, we here have instructions on how to use the AR customer screen. We have set up some examples, and during the course of today's presentation, keep an eye for screen notes like this, generally with a blue background. But first, let's delve into more details and start with documents relating to AP vendor invoices and payments. Nancy is going to give us an overview of the Document Management Link tray with AP invoices. She will show us how to add documents when entering invoices. We will then view the documents when entering AP payments in Sage 300 and approving payment batches in the Tayroc's SOX check approval module. In this presentation, we are focusing on the DML side of things. For a detailed presentation of the Tayroc's check approval, refer to the video on the RLA YouTube channel. Over to you, Nancy.
So if we open up our AP invoice batch, and so the way Document Management Link works is you'll notice this additional window appears beside the Sage screen. So this can be changed in size. I've pinned it to my Sage screen, so if I move or minimize my Sage screen, the Document Management Link will move with it or minimize with it. And that's helpful if you're opening multiple screens in Sage 300. It's a way for you to keep track of the documents attached to each screen. And you'll notice too that it mimics the color coding. So if you have multiple companies and they're different colors, then again, an easy way to keep track of the documents related to each company. Now, I mentioned we're linking at the field level. So the first field is around the vendor number. So we're linking to the vendor number field And then based on the value within that field, it knows which documents to display. On my C drive, if we go to my C drive, Orchid, documents, for my AP documents, you'll see here for vendor 5010, there's a folder here. And when I open up that folder, that's what I'm seeing in the document management link window. Now, this product is sophisticated enough that once you get the folder hierarchy in place, this will start to build out for you. So you notice here, I've only got folders for vendor 1200, 1350, and 5010. If we go to the next entry, you'll notice that it's for vendor 7200, and there's nothing showing here because I haven't linked any documents to that vendor yet. So if I go to add a document, and I can just, go out anywhere in my environment to pick up the document that I want to link here, and I can just grab that and drag it over the document management link window. And what's happened in this case is it's created the folder for my vendor 7200 and then filed that document into that folder. So if we go back to my C drive, Orchid, documents, for my AP documents, you'll see here it created the folder for vendor 7200, and then it linked that document and stored it in that folder. Now, what I've done in this second window is I've done a configuration around 2 fields. So in this instance, I am storing the document in that vendor folder. So in my vendor 5010 folder, I'm going to store that document. But in this particular window, I want to isolate based on the document number. So I'm linking to the vendor number and the document number field. And this gives me an easy way to view the documents related to this particular entry. But I don't want to have a separate folder for every document that I set up an AP invoice for. So I'm grouping them by vendor. But by doing this second configuration, I can easily view the documents that relate to this particular entry. So when I go to add a document here and I drag it into the document management link window, you notice from my suspense folder, it just said invoice. And when I dragged it into the window, it renamed the document. So that's what I alluded to earlier, where you can optionally configure document management link to rename a document. And in this instance, I specified when I drag a document into that window, I want to rename it based on the document number that was entered on the AP invoice entry screen. So you can link as many documents as you want. If I go to add another document here, if I drag another Excel document in, it's going to recognize that it already renamed an Excel document to 307-1. So it gives you the ability to overwrite. So if you've dragged an incorrect document in, you can overwrite what's there. If you're doing it on a different date and you want to put a date stamp on it, you can do that. Or you can just start to add -1, -2, and so on. So you're not limited to the number of documents that you link through the window. The box will expand and add in a scroll bar where necessary if you exceed the size of the window. There's no limit to the types of documents that you link here. As long as you have the necessary program, you can double click and open up any of those documents through the document management link window. Now, in the third instance, we've linked to the purchase order number. And so this is where I'm linking to this purchase order number field. Now, in this instance, the documents would have been attached in the purchase order module. But what you can do within your configuration, you can choose to view documents against all screens. So in the case of this PO number, the configuration that I did was when I link a document to a purchase order number, I want to be able to see those documents against every screen where the purchase order number appears. So because it's appearing here in the AP invoice screen, I can see that document here. And so we have one invoice that is under $500. So we'll expect that to go into the approval console as approved. And then the next payment we have here in the batch, we've got that's under $2,000. So that's going to go to our general manager for approval. And we'll go ahead and add a document here for that. And then our third payment is over $2,000. So that's going to skip the general manager and go to the controller for approval. And again, we'll add a copy of the invoice. And then finally, we've got a fourth payment in this batch that's again over $2,000. We'll send that to the controller for approval, and we'll decline this one. And we've linked all of our documents here in Document Management Link. So we'll go ahead and post this invoice batch. And then come over and we'll create our payment batch. And we'll start to add in these payments. And the first vendor was 5010. And there's our invoice 307-1. So we'll add that to the payment batch. And you can see I'm seeing the backup documents here against the AP payment entry screen. And our next vendor was vendor 7200. And here's 307-2. So we'll add that payment. It was vendor 8950. Will be for vendor 9230. So there's our payment batch. Now what you'll notice here is we've added an extra button to the extended, we've called it the extended payment batch. So it's the same payment batch screen that you're used to in Sage 300, but we've added this button and we've put a control around the screen. So if I try to print checks or post the payment batch, it's going to tell me it hasn't been approved. So you can't print those checks and you can't post the batch. So the user will just submit that for approval. So batch 91, yes, I want to submit that for approval. And the approvers have been notified. And you'll see here the button sits in an in progress status. So it's put this batch on hold. So nothing can be changed within that batch while it's going through the approval process. And any user logging in will see that it's currently in progress. You can click on that. And as it goes through the approval process, you can see who's done the approvals. So now we'll log in as the general manager. And what we'll expect to see here is the first payment will be approved because it was under $500. And then there'll be one payment that was under $2,000 that the general manager is responsible to approve. So this is our webinar March 7th batch. And you can see here that the first payment went in as approved because it was under $500. And the second payment is the one that I need to review and approve. And down here, you can see this dynamically changes as I click on each line. And I can click on that button and I can view the documents that have been attached. So that's the integration with Document Management Link, where I can view documents outside of Sage 300 in this approval console.
For today, we will stop at this approval step, as we have seen documents available on the Xerox console. You can view the full demonstration of the payment approval on the RLA YouTube channel. Now we can look at vendor activity in Sage 300. You can see my notes and all the documents for vendor 1200. And going to the Transactions tab, as I select each document, you can see the individual documents that have been filed when processing the transactions are available. And looking at our vendor 7200, similar. I've got my AP invoice and my AP invoice in there. The same documents are can also be made available if you're using the desktop and the web screens. So if we look at vendor activity, on the web screens, you can see all our documents for vendor 7200 Leon's Catering. And if I go to the transaction screen, I can see my filter by individual invoice. And again, I can double click and view the detailed PDF. This provided some examples of how the finance team can share documents when processing vendor transactions. Let's expand this a little bit and look at how we can track information about vendors, subcontractors, and employees among project teams and HR teams. And for this, we're going to look at an example of adding documents to project and job costing subcontractor screen in Sage 300. So this customer is using project and job costing, and they have set up some subcontractors in project and job costing. So as you can see, I've already got some documents for Frank Esso, our design consultants, and I have stored the SLA agreement. In this example, I've stored it in SharePoint. I can double click on it and open the document from here. I'm in a team working with a new subcontractor, Marshall Davidson, and I want to upload some documents for this vendor 2100. So again, here in my scan document, I have my SLA agreement that has been signed by Marshall. As I'm uploading to SharePoint, I can enter some more detail about this document. It's now saved in SharePoint for other team members to use. And I can double click on here and open, or again, if I go to my vendor screen and find Marshall Davidson there as another team member, I can view the same document. We've seen an example then of setting up document management link for use with PJC and AP Vendor in SharePoint. Let's now ask Anne to show us some example of using document management link to track employee qualifications as both a project team member in PJC and being able to view this information in the Canadian payroll.
You can use Document Management Link to attach relevant information to your employees. So maybe the information is first made available as part of the payroll setup. And when you're creating the employees, you can attach the relevant information, in this case, a CV and their engineering qualifications. And to attach information for a new employee, you can drag and drop into the configured DML folder. So if I drag in the qualifications and the CV, we have now the attached documents for employee 100500. And once attached, these documents can be seen on any Sage 300 screen where the employee ID is shown. So a relevant place might be in project and job costing, around the employee setup, so where you're linking your PJC employees to payroll employees where appropriate. We can now see the same attached documentation. And it may also be relevant when you're recording a timesheet to see that information. And we can see this information here too. And similarly, in EFT, you may need to see that information when you're setting up the EFT details for the EFT employee. And even when you're coming to send the remittance advice, you may need to check some information at that stage. So any Sage 300 screen which has the employee number or the employee ID tag on the screen, you'd be able to see the attached information. And the configuration needed for this. For the Canadian Payroll employee screen, we configure on the employee number field and specify the folder with the documents being stored per company. And then we use that same configuration for the PJC employees, pointing to the same folder, but this time the label's employee number. And for the PJC timesheets, this time it's employee number and the same folders. And similarly for the EFT employee, we have the same configuration, but this time the field is called employee ID.
Projects team also often work with new customers, which has an implication with the finance teams. So let's look at an example of using Document Management Link to track AR customer credit checks and also direct debit mandates for use in EFT. So back to PJC, if we look at this contract for Mr. Ronald Black, we can see here that we have stored a credit check. So as part of my project management role, I can find all the information that I need about Mr. Ronald Black's credit check. Some of my finance team members use the Sage 300 web screens for their transactions, in particular to check their EFT customers. So let's look at customer Acme Plumbing, and as you can see, I also have already saved my SEPA direct debit mandate for 1200, which I can also double click and view from the web screen. Alternatively, I can also take a new customer 1500, and it's a new customer, it's a new mandate. And here's my SEPA direct debit mandate for customer 1500, which I can upload. It renames it with the customer number. I can open it and enter the details, including the expiry date of this mandate. I could also at the same time realize that don't have the credit check uploaded, so I can put my credit check report here for custom comfort. So we've seen that some team members can use the classic desktop screens or the Sage 300 web screens. Same functionality is available for EFT vendors and EFT employees. And of course, for security reasons, while we're talking here about transparency and collaboration, users can only view these documents within the Sage 300 context if they have access to EFT processing within Sage Security. So you can set up your folders to be specific for your EFT related documents and subject to different network security rules. So only the users who can see the bank details and those signed direct debit mandates can actually view them. We're going to stay with the finance team for the moment and have a look at using Document Management Link with bank services in Sage 300. We'll incorporate in the example creating a bank transfer for a bank configured in inter-entity cash management. We're not going to get into the detail of using cash management. There is a special video for this, but we will show you how users can view the documents uploaded in the context of one company in the other company. In the finance team, I receive an email from my manager asking me to transfer from bank 1 to bank B for an interco payment. So I'm going to go into bank transactions and I'm going to do a bank transfer from bank CCB. So you can see as I'm selecting the banks, the tray is popping up. I can add documents as need be, but I need to have my transfer document first. And I'm going to transfer to bank E2 CCB, which is configured for cash management inter-entity. And I'm going to do just 10,000. I'm going to post this transaction. So I've got the information that cash management has created the bank entry in company Org Ltd and also in Org IN2, my second company. I'm going to save this email here against bank transfer 12. As you can see, Document Management Link has renamed the email with a bank transfer. I can double click on it to open the email with the instructions. And two things now happen. If I look at my bank entry, you can see all the interco transfer messages from previously. And if I select the one that was just created now, I can see that the transfer 12 message supporting this bank entry is there. Now that I'm logged into my Entity 2 company, if I look at my transactions in there, in my bank entry, let me find the one that was created, transfer 15, coming from CCB in Entity 12. I have the same document that I can view. So it's interco transfer for that 6,000 amount supported by this document. So that's inter-entity plus Document Management Link magic. So now back in the web screens, Anne needs to do the bank rec. So if I'm going to my bank reconciliation and look at the CCB bank, I'll go straight to the tab and I just want to deal with withdrawals from now. If I go to the end there with the latest transactions that I've entered, I select the transfer 12 that I've just done and I can see that my email message supporting this document is also there available, and similarly I can open that email and view the detail. So we've seen here a combination of the documents being uploaded on the desktop screens, visible in another company when the transaction has been automated by inter-entity cash management, and also visible when doing the bank reconciliation on the web screens. Time now for a little pause in looking at more examples, and just let's have a look at how this is configured in Information Manager. In the options here, on the Nodes DML extended tray, this is where we do the configuration. So there's no coding, it is just configuration as to where the files are going to come from, what notes we want to see, and on what screen. So let's look at the examples for bank. So bank entry corresponds to the web screen, and we're looking for a field called description. And this is where the folder is going to be. So again, the folders are per configuration, so you could have your bank folders on a different network share that only some users have access to, the users that need to do bank transactions, or it could be a sync Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive folder. And you can configure your own heading. Optionally, you can rename the file like we've seen in some examples. This is similar configuration for the bank screen in the bank entry screen in Sage 300. And we look at our bank recs, where I can see my bank code documents. And also this is where I'm configured to view the transfer documents when doing the bank rec. In our next example, we're still working with the finance team, and we're going to do two things. We're going to enter long description using notes for a GL account. We're also going to attach documents when entering GL transactions. If I look at my GL accounts, we've got our screen instruction reminding us to select the appropriate currency on the currency tab and to select the relevant structure code, including our division and region. And here for my 6500 account, it's to be used on purchase order when ordering non-inventory items, and it captures these. So because I have rights, I can update this note. The security rights around adding, viewing, and updating the notes are user by user. Let me now enter a GL journal. As I'm selecting GL account, you can see the note is popping up next to the screen, so I know what to use this account for. I can upload documents to support this GL journal. Because I'd already uploaded a document, I can date this one today and continue processing my transaction. So now I'm going to hand over to Anne to show us another example of using document management link in conjunction with inter-entity and transactions coming from the subledger.
Document Management Link can be configured to show the same document in multiple Sage 300 companies. So thinking about the inter-entity transaction scenario, so invoice 2025-0119, we want to distribute to 3 entities, Entity 1, Entity 2, and Entity 3. So using Document Management Link, I can configure to upload the document to the intercompany Invoices folder. So when we upload this document, it gets renamed based on the invoice number and the vendor number. And that is based on my DML configuration. So if we go ahead and post that batch, and having a look at it in the general ledger, we have the original AP invoice available for us to review and see the allocation to Entity 1. And posting this batch in the general ledger into Entity Transactions automatically raises the loan account entries in Entity 1 and sends the appropriate transactions to Entity 2 and Entity 3. And if we log into Entity 2, and have a look at the GL batch that was created by InterEntity, we see we have access to the same invoice that was initially attached to the AP invoice in Orc Limited. And the configuration that's needed for this was firstly for the AP invoice entry web screen. We needed to configure on the vendor number and document number and store it in the intercompany directory, and the file name would be vendor number - document number. And then in our AP setup for the GL integration, we need to send the vendor number - document number to the GL reference. And then for the GL journal entry on the web screen, because we are sending the vendor number - document number to the reference field, the configuration is on the grid reference field, and we configure to the same directory as we did from the AP invoice entry, the intercompany directory. In Orking 2, for the GL web screens, also on the GL reference field where we're sending vendor number, document number, we configure to the same intercompany directory as what we used for the AP invoice entry, the original AP invoice entry in Orc Limited, and the same directory was used for the GL journal entry in Orc Limited as well.
We've seen a few examples of using document management link and notes for the finance team. Let's now move on to examples looking at operations and procurement. And for this, we will focus on inventory, item documents, and looking at purchase orders. So in this example, we're looking at adding QA documents and notes per items. So on the web screens, if I'm looking at item A11030, our fluorescent desk lamp, I'm seeing two notes with different background colors, so this is all configurable. And I have my QA documents that have been uploaded previously. I could add some more. I can double click to view the details and make sure it is still right. I can check the documents for the next one. I've got my dangerous goods labels and my shipping documentation. So I'm now going to enter a new purchase order. So first for my stock item, so I can order my fluorescent desk lamp for location 1. I can see the notes here for that item and the documents that I looked at before with my document with the QA checks to be done. If I enter my second item, also for location 1, same quantity of replacement bulbs, I have my long note with my longer description and the documents that belong, the QA documents that belong to this item. So you may notice on this screen we have some extra buttons. They've been added by Extender. We're not looking at the detail of that today, but I'm just going to show you the impact it has on Document Management Link. So you could manually print the PO, save it with the right name and into this folder. But if I click this button, it's going to print the document and save it with PO number 48 name into the vendor folder in the configured folder for Document Management Link. So if I refresh my tray, you can see that PO 48 is now here in this folder. So you can add the document by dragging from your emails or from the tray, but if a document makes its way with the right name into the right folder, you can also view it in Document Management Link. Let me now quickly add another PO for a non-stock, a new inventory item. So I can see my expense account is set to 63801 and I have my longer description there, and this tells me that this is only to be used for consumable supplies and not for big capital expenditures. So that's one way that you can use notes entered against a particular GL account and use them in the transaction that use those GL account. And this would work on the web screens as well as on the desktop screens. We've seen some examples with operations and procurement adding documents against inventory items. Similar thing can happen within sales team, customer service and finance teams. So what we're going to look at now is an example of a customer service entering a return in the RMA module, finding a customer invoice, viewing the document relating to that invoice that has been saved previously by the finance team, and then we're going to create a replacement order and share that with the sales team as well. As customer service team member, I'm entering an RA, a return for customer 1200. As I'm selecting the customer, I can see a few things happening. I have my instructions for the screen reminding me to check the NPS score when I'm creating the RMA, and I can see that here at the bottom. This is coming from Extender, and we will cover that in more detail in a future presentation, or you can find information about that on the website. I have here all the different invoices and POs dealing with Mr. Ronald Black, so I could double check the invoice they're talking about. Double click on this to view invoice number 2. I can select my invoice number 2. And now that I've selected invoice number 2, this is filtering by the invoice that I have selected for this line. I still have reference to my credit check. Open the Zoom screen to check what's going on with this order. I actually want this to go on this one is the one they're returning 1, and I want to put this on the replacement order at 0 value because this was damaged, and generate my replacement order. Replacement order has been created. That's my last replacement order, order 112. So I can drill down to that order. So here's my order 112, replacement order at 0 with the RMA reference here and with all the relevant document my notes around credit limit for the customer, my sales history notes, back to my documents for this item, and my item notes. So we've seen how we can view order entry invoice documents when processing a return. So hopefully this has given you some ideas as to how to use document management link and notes within the broad spectrum of potential users of Sage 300 in the various teams that need access to information and documents. We've looked at an example of the setup for bank entry. As you can see, there is no coding. You add documents and notes to up to 2 fields on a given screen. You have you can link that to third-party screens developed in the SDK. So we've looked at EFT and RMA examples. You can configure notes and document management link on both the Sage desktop screens and the web screens. If you're using the desktop screens, you can use SharePoint configuration. And you can mix and match. So you can use both the web screens and the desktop screens. You can have some documents in SharePoint, some in network folders, some in synced drive. The rename is optional depending on how you want to store the information. One important thing in the recent product update is that you now set up DML users, so document management link users, in the Information Manager license screen. In Info Manager setup on the license screen, this is where you now configure the users that are using the DML licenses. They are still concurrent users. You don't have to tick the box in the tray. If you look at the system tray, there is no DML user box anymore. You would still configure your SharePoint details if you're using SharePoint. So this is an important change since PU 13 for all the supported versions. So in summary, Document Management Link gives you easy access to documents from your Sage screen. It helps improve customer interactions because your documents are just a click away. You don't have to leave Sage 300. It supports remote work. You don't rely on physical documents anymore, and it helps make the paperless office a reality. I think we've demonstrated that configuration is highly flexible, and you have different storage and sharing options depending on your existing document scanning and storage regime. With Notes, it helps share information and improve collaboration with a similar highly flexible configuration. And we have touched on briefly in this presentation that when you combine Note with Extender to do extended notes, you have even more flexibility and more the ability to create conditional notes, on-the-fly notes, and enhanced functionality to drill down to some transactions within Sage 300. Thank you very much for your time. We're now open for a Q&A, and a reminder that you can access resources on the Orchid website, training videos, knowledge base, and online help.